Good morning, our viewers. Welcome to today's roundtable discussion organized by the Council for Strategic Affairs. My name is Dr. Adityanjee, and I am the president of the Council for Strategic Affairs. Those of you who registered in advance probably saw this flyer. The topic of today's roundtable discussion is Russia-NATO war, the end game. Before we go on to the actual topic, I'll give a brief introduction about Council for Strategic Affairs. CSA imparts education in the field of international relations. CSA fosters discussion, dialogue, and debate on geopolitical issues. The Council encourages strategic studies in general to raise the level of awareness. We condemn terrorism in all its forms worldwide. The Council aims to contribute towards world peace and prosperity. The CSA promotes people-to-people contacts and track-to diplomacy. CSA is registered as a 501c3 organization with the Internal Revenue Service in the USA. So we are a non-profit organization, and we encourage all our audience who are based in US to donate and support to CSA. The link is there. It's there on the website also. We do a monthly roundtable discussion just like we are having today. Usually it is done on second Saturday of each month at 10 a.m. Eastern Day Time. But this being holiday month, we have to compress the schedule in first 2 weeks. We have a monthly guest lecture by a domain expert, usually on fourth Saturday of each month at 10 a.m. Eastern Day Time. We have a one-on-one interview series called Strategically Speaking with Dr. Adityanjee. The Council organizes symposia, meetings, and conferences. We promote publications of articles on geopolitics and related subjects. We have a fellowship training program in strategic studies, and we have our second fellow who has joined fairly recently. When we made the announcement, we had 5 distinguished panelists. One of them has a family emergency, so will not be able to join. Hopefully, the rest 4 will join today. Our first panelist is Major General Shashi Bhushan Asthana. Major Shashi Bhushan Asthana is not a guest anymore on this platform. He is a regular invitee. He has been through numerous roundtable discussions as well as distinguished lectures. He is a globally acknowledged security and strategic analyst who has authored more than 400 publications. He has a 45 years experience at national, international levels as a infantry general. He was former Director General of Infantry in Indian Army, head of training team in Defense Services Staff College at Wellington. Besides his numerous appointments in the Indian Army and United Nations, he has been a TV commentator, speaker in various strategic military forums, organizations, think tanks, and universities. At this point in time, he is the chief instructor / director of instruction for USI of India, the oldest think tank of India. So he would be our first speaker. We also have Dr. Satoru Nagao from Japan. Dr. Satoru Nagao is a non-resident fellow at Hudson Institute based in Tokyo, Japan. His primary research area is US-Japan-India security cooperation. He was awarded his PhD by Gakushūin University in 2011 for his thesis, India's Military Strategy, the first research thesis on this topic in Japan. Dr. Nagao holds numerous research positions, including director at the International Security Industry Council, senior research fellow at Japan Forum for Strategic Studies, specially appointed research fellow at the Japan Forum of International Relations, etc., etc. He has authored numerous books and articles on security issues, He also contributes to a column, Age of Japan-India Alliance at Nikkei Business, a journal of one of Japan's leading newspapers. And I'm very proud to say that he has also been a frequent guest at our platform. Then we have Major General Gagandeep Bakshi. Major General Bakshi was born in Jabalpur, Madhya Pradesh. He was educated for his schooling in Jabalpur, and after that he joined NDA at Khadagwasla in Pune. He was commissioned in Indian Army from IMA Dehradun in November of 1971. He commanded the 6th Jammu and Kashmir Rifles. He was awarded Vishisht Seva Medal. He has served 2 tenures at the Director General of Military Operations and was the first BGS IW at the Northern Command. Currently, he is a respected author, TV commentator, and media personality. And our last distinguished panelist is Ambassador Shashank. Ambassador Shashank holds a master's in science and physics. He joined Indian Foreign Services in 1966. He has had more than 40 years of diplomatic career. He has served as Indian Ambassador to Libya, High Commissioner to Malta, Indian Ambassador to South Korea, Indian Ambassador to Indonesia, Ambassador to Denmark. From November 19 to 2003 to July 31st, 2004, he was Foreign Secretary of India. So those are our distinguished guests. The topic is Russia-NATO war, the end game. People talk about Russia-Ukraine war, but I deliberately put the title as Russia-NATO war, and this will become very obvious in our roundtable discussion. This is a map showing the current situation and some of the missiles that Ukraine has now, what is their range. This is a recent meeting in December of 2024 of NATO. I think it was on 4th of December. So definitely NATO is becoming a party here. Our format is that after my introduction, there will be opening statements by each panelist for 8 minutes each. After these opening statements, we'll have moderated discussion for 20 minutes, followed by Q&A from the audience for 25 minutes, and then the closing statement. So my request to the distinguished panelists is that please limit your opening statement to 8 minutes each. Some housekeeping rules. Please mute yourself to avoid noise interference. Please change your cell phone to vibration mode. Please do not try to interrupt our esteemed panelists. Only those members of the audience who identify themselves openly will be allowed to pose questions. No anonymous questioners, please. All the questions have to be sent by chat function. Please be very precise and specific in asking a question. Don't send lengthy comments in the form of a monologue. We are recording this program. It's also being live streamed on our YouTube channel, and it will be available as a resource for future on our website. And I will again emphasize, Council for Strategic Affairs is registered as a 501c3 organization with the IRS in US. Please donate and support CSA. The link is here. It is available on the website. Especially our audience from the US, we request them to donate and support us. Now, without further ado, I'm going to invite our first panelist, which is Major General Asthana, followed by Major General G.D. Bakshi. So Major General Asthana, please give your open statement before I start with Major General Bakshi. You are muted, sir. Kindly unmute yourself. Unmute yourself, Major General Asthana.
Okay, thank you, thank you. Respected Dr. Adityanjee, esteemed co-panelists, ladies and gentlemen, I'm happy to see that Dr. Adityanjee has already changed the topic. Earlier, we used to talk about Russia-Ukraine war, and now it is NATO-Ukraine war. And if you recall earlier, am I audible? Am I audible, please?
Yes, sir, you are audible. Please go ahead.
Okay. Sorry. So earlier we used to say that Russia and Ukraine are fighting a kinetic contact war. But now when we talk, and that time perhaps NATO was fighting a non-contact, non-kinetic war in terms of economic domain, uh, diplomatic, political domain, cyber domain, and so on and so forth. But now, with more and more involvement of ATACMs being fired, with a large number of mercenaries, stroke, uh, the soldiers of the NATO getting involved under the garb of contractors and being found as prisoners of war and being exchanged, I think the NATO has gone into the kinetic war and therefore appropriately has been uh, perhaps titled accordingly. Uh, we know that Cold War 1.0 between Russia and NATO should have ended with breakup of USSR, but it didn't happen and it continues. Kind courtesies, the arms lobby and the oil lobby of United States who benefit with the expansion of NATO eastwards. And expansion of NATO eastward is not only directional expansion. The idea is to get more market and more captive market. And that is how perhaps they started knocking the door of Russia. But at the same time, we have Cold War 2.0 between USA and China too. Now, what has happened now is that both are running concurrently and getting mixed up. Whether this mix-up is in Syria, whether this mix-up is elsewhere, which I will touch upon a little later. So I'll first say as to what the current situation is. These standoff attacks are going on both sides. Russia has made significant gains in front line, and the ATACMs and Storm Shadow are being fired, but I don't think it has made any major difference as far as front line is concerned. Of course, Russia has responded with firing of Oreshnik missile and given a message to NATO as well. And perhaps this has led to some kind of escalation. But apparently there are calculations and miscalculations both sides. I think Joe Biden has taken a chance that even if there is a little bit of escalation, perhaps the brunt of escalation may be handled by the next president, and he wants to manage it for next 2 years because he was getting an impression that if Zelensky raises his hands before 20th of January, then Democrats have no face to show, and same is the case with Europeans. So as far as these two players are concerned, they would like this war to continue and Zelensky to keep fighting till last Ukrainian standing. But now there is a problem elsewhere too, in a manner that with the election of President Trump, things are changing. You have seen the change in the tone of Zelensky, who says that he doesn't mind losing territory in exchange of a guaranteed seat and invite in NATO. And once he gets into NATO with negotiations, he will get the territory back. Now, everybody knows with that negotiations, you can't get the territory back anyway. But then the fact is the tone is changing. At the same time, as far as NATO is concerned, they are also trying to divert the attention of Russia. Now, whatever is happening in Syria, it may be different reasons, but one of the main aim is that divert the attention of Russia by opening a multiple front. So, earlier they tried to divert the attention by launching Kursk offensive. It did made some gain because Ukrainians do hold some territory in Russia. And at the same time, what happened was that Russians have taken back almost 45% of the territory, but and for the remaining territory, there will be a tug of war because Ukrainians hold some important positions terrain-wise. So there will be a little more casualties. So that's one part of it. But they will try and push out Ukrainians anyway. So, but the whole aim of this offensive was to divert attention from Donbass region or Donetsk region, which did not happen. Russia continued focused, and after 2 years, when Russians had a viable defense line, now with that as a firm base, they are inching ahead. The war continues to be attrition war, very slow moving, but relative speed in last 2 months has been quite fast. So this is what is happening in the war front, and hypersonic missiles have been tested in war. So therefore, the implications of that has been demonstrated to the NATO as well as to the others. And I find that the intensity of so-called ATACM hype that is going down because not very many are being fired. Now coming on to when we look at end game, we look at end game at what was the aim and what did they achieve. Now look at the Russian side. The aim was very clear: capture Donbass, provide a land link between Donbass and Crimea, ensure Ukraine does not join NATO, and aim plus was that if you can get Donetsk, not Donetsk, sorry, Odessa, you can landlock Ukraine. Now this was the aim. Now if you see, so far whatever one may say, language notwithstanding, what NATO keeps saying, Ukraine is still not in NATO and is unlikely to be so. As far as Russia has captured 20% more territory, and their corridor is already in place. So by and large, if you take the Kursk part of it and the remaining Donetsk part of it, they are quite close to their aim. As far as US and West is concerned, of course, they have weakened Russia, they wanted to, but earlier their aim used to be Putin must lose. Now it is Putin must not win. So there is a subtle adjustment there. Similarly, the arms lobby wanted that, okay, this war should continue. They have sold enough, shall I say, arms and have made enough profit. But there is another factor which says that resources of Ukraine must be utilized by USA and it should not be left to Russia. Now, this is something which is attractive to NATO. Similarly, as far as Europeans are concerned, the Russian threat was hyped. So they in any case did not have a choice, because if it is a US-led NATO and if US says so, Europeans have to follow that. And now Europeans are feeling the heat of it, having brought the escalation to a level. They find themselves in an awkward situation, because if Trump doesn't back them, they have to find an alternative and work out themselves. Now, considering how they are, their armed forces are not in a very good shape. Their political chaos is even worse. You find what is happening in France and what has happened in Germany. So I don't think by themselves they are in a position. I think the call will have to be taken by Washington only. So therefore, when we look at the end game, I think Russian analysis of the conflict termination and the end state was reasonable, and they have been able to perhaps reach out or have got some direction as to how they are looking at. As far as EU and NATO is concerned, I don't think that they thought through the end game and the conflict termination and the exit strategy. And that's why they find themselves that, okay, what in my opinion the end game is likely to be is President Trump, I don't think, is very much interested in carrying a liability of Ukraine in NATO. So his inclusion into NATO with Trump is slightly difficult. He may either give him an option that, okay, postpone it indefinitely or at least 20 years or something like that. Similarly, as far as on-ground situation is concerned, I don't think very much is going to change. Similarly, although Europe would like Zelensky to fight, as till last Ukrainian standing, but that last Ukrainian is finding it difficult to remain alive and standing because he has got a manpower problem. Now, irrespective of how much money you promise and how much arsenal you promise, the problem is there is the human beings have to fight. And if Ukraine doesn't have human beings and 80,000 decide to desert the services, there is a serious issue. And that is why perhaps Biden became a little too active in last 2 months because he thought that if Zelensky surrenders or Zelensky raises his hand, he has a problem at his hand. So he wants to keep it alive at least till 20th of January and thereafter let Trump handle. So I'll stop here. We have many speakers and take on the questions later.
Thank you very much indeed, Major General Shashi Bhushan Asthana, for your gracious opening comments. I really thank you for keeping in the time limit of 8 minutes. Now it's my pleasure and honor to invite Major General G.D. Bakshi to give his opening statement. General Bakshi, you have 8 minutes for the opening statement. And after all the speakers have spoken, then we'll have a discussion. So Major General G.D. Bakshi, kindly come on the platform. Kindly unmute yourself as well as put your camera on, General Bakshi. Sir, unmute yourself. You are muted. Yeah. So you are still muted.
You are muted, sir. You
are muted. We cannot hear
unmute
you.
yourself,
Kindly
sir.
unmute yourself.
Don't know.
Yes, we can hear
Now?
you now. Yes.
Now, all right, all right. Dr. Adityanjee, fellow colleagues, panelists, ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to state that the Ukraine conflict, the conflict in Ukraine, marks a significant paradigm shift in the nature of war, and it takes it back to what it was more or less at the end of the Second World War, at the end of the First World War, more appropriately, the Second World War. In the closing phases of the 20th century, we had seen an era of low intensity conflict. We had seen an era of asymmetric wars where a unipolar United States, kicked the daylights out of Syria, Libya, Afghanistan, Iraq, etc. Lightweight countries which were no match militarily for the United States. So that era of asymmetric wars, that era of unequal wars taught us very wrong lessons. I think this Russia-Ukraine conflict and now Russia-NATO conflict, as is being rightly pointed out, is of seminal relevance to the world, but to India in particular, because almost 70% of our equipment is of Russian origin. So we have to cater for how that equipment is performed and what are the changes that we now need to factor in as a result of this war. Like I said, it has also been a revolution in military affairs, an RMA brought about by the large-scale use of rockets and missiles, including hypersonic missiles, and the latest entry is the Oceanic IRBM hypersonic, right? And then there are the drones, which have brought about a paradigm shift in the nature of war, the lethality of war, the cost effectiveness. A tank worth about $2 million and more can be destroyed by a drone worth $200 and less, perhaps. You see, that has brought about an absolute paradigm shift in the nature of war fighting. And if I might dare to describe it as such, it is a revolution in military affairs. And unless you keep pace, now we found Syria did not keep pace with this RMA brought about by drones. And they have been, in the initial phases, routed in Aleppo and in Homs, etc. It is amazing why they did not know about drones, why they did not have drones introduced in their own army. They paid a price in the initial stages. So the fact of the matter is there are very seminal lessons for military men in this conflict, which we can't wait to introduce, after this war is over. We have to do it in the here and now, and that is why, while the war was on, I wrote my book on the Russia-Ukraine war lessons learned, because some lessons have to be ingested, implemented right away. Nobody can wait. If you wait, like Syria, you will suffer. You will pay a price. In hindsight, I would like to state that this war was a war of choice by the United States and NATO. Initially, a proxy war of choice, and now it's become a direct conflict, right? The intention was to poke Russia in the eye till it was forced to invade. They had violated all promises of not 1 inch eastward expansion of NATO, right till the doors of Russia they had reached, and then Russia had put its final two red lines as Ukraine and Georgia. And when both were violated, Russia had no option but to react. And the moment it reacted in Ukraine, they had that playbook ready, and that playbook was unleashed to, clamp the heaviest known sanctions, economic sanctions on Russia. The aim was to collapse Russia economically, like the Soviet Union had been collapsed in 1990, and to cause about regime change in Moscow. It was as ambitious as that. It is another matter that economic war backfired quite badly, and Russia is now economically stronger than it was at the start of this conflict, right? And it is the European Union which has suffered the most economically in this conflict. America has made a profit because of its military industries, but it is Russia has also emerged economically stronger, but it is the European Union which has more or less been ruined. There is chaos in Europe. Europe's natural linkages for gas and oil was with Russia. Geographically, they were so contiguous, and uprooting those linkages has caused the greatest economic devastation to Europe. Europe specifically, they have paid a price. And if the Trump era now kicks in with full vigor as he has promised, they will be further held to pay for the European countries. So that's that. As far as the course of the war is concerned, it is very, both the sides have innovated, both the sides have adapted during the course of the war. And one lesson that has clearly emerged is we have in India the school of manpower versus technology. It is an either or equation. A lot of people in India feel that manpower is a damn waste of resources. We must cut manpower, cut the flab, follow the Americans, and reduce our revenue budgets to increase our capital budgets, etc. May I sound a note of caution? Does Russia lack equipment? It does not. Initially, it went in with a low manpower committal, and it paid a heavy price. It had to mobilize 300,000 during the course of the war in September of the first year of the war, and then it has had to mobilize more, and even these are falling short. Ukraine had mobilized from the outset, but 8 million Ukrainians had fled the country, and that manpower base has been bled white. And it is very, very heartless to see, disheartening to see how the Americans are asking them to reduce the age of for mobilization, get the teenagers off the street, get the people from old people's home, and then shove them into the fight. Really fight Russia to the last Ukrainian standing. And that may not be very long now, So the fact of the matter is the Russians have innovated. When the drones were used against them initially, they they sort of quickly got in their own drones, and now about 50,000 drones a month and more are being used. It's the heavy expenditure in terms of drones on both sides. The Russians have overtaken the Ukrainians in the use of drones, right? FPV drones, suicide drones, and a whole lot of drones which are impervious to electronic warfare, etc. So the drones have created, like I said, an RMA. And any country which fails to understand this is going to pay a heavy, heavy price, like the Syrians have just recently paid. So, to get on with the basic structure of the fighting, in the first year, I mean, the Russians attacked and they made extremely good progress initially. They thought it would be a very short war from 10 days to a month, etc., was being this thing. And at the end of the first 3 months in April 2022, they had started negotiations mediated by Belarus and then Turkey. And they had come to a very viable peace treaty, which, if Ukraine had accepted, it would have been much better off than it will be now in 2025. So, but the British Prime Minister Boris Johnson flew in, torpedoed that very sensible peace treaty that was being talked of, and the war has continued. And then they started this, hoopla about Russia. Ukraine is going to win the war, is going to kick the Russians all the way back to Moscow, etc., etc. I mean, overhyped, and you start believing your own propaganda narratives, then you are heading for trouble. And the simple fact is that, well, the mismatch between subjective and objective reality has been getting bigger and bigger as far as the NATO and the Ukrainians are concerned.
Sir,
For the
kindly
simple
conclude
fact is that the Russians then mobilized. They created their three-tiered defense lines. The Sorokin line, and they beat back next year the Ukrainian offensives. They took heavy losses, disproportionate losses, and then now they have reverted back to the counteroffensive. My friend Asthana spoke about, Ravi Asthana spoke about the Kursk surprise counteroffensive, but it failed to divert any resources from the Donbass towards the Kursk, and 45% has been taken back. Looks like it's going to be a disaster at the end of the day in terms of wastage of resources and not achieving the aim that it had set out to do. The Russians are making incremental but very steady, relentless progress in the east. They have used FAB glide toss bombs. They have used their hypersonic missiles, the Iskandars and the others. They have used the medium artillery, almost 50,000 rounds a day of medium artillery have been used to, absolutely stun the defenders. It's not temporary neutralization, but lasting neutralization of sorts, which they have been aiming for, and with the help of which, and by stopping tank attacks. There are no major tank attacks now. They are dismounted infantry on motorcycles, infantry on these have been making steady gains, slow but steady gains. And in the last month alone, they have captured 250 square kilometers of territory, which they are going to be pressing forward. They have made breakthroughs, significant breakthroughs, Petrovask, etc. And I think we are approaching end game as far as this thing is concerned. The conflict is concerned.
Thank you,
Now,
General Bakshi.
Biden's
In conclusion,
plan has been quite obviously that let the disaster happen, not on my watch, but on Donald Trump's watch. Donald Trump has said, and I think very rightly so, that these are conflicts I did start. I have no stake in these conflicts, and I would like to end them as quickly as possible, both in Europe and the Middle East. But Biden's plan seems to be to ensure that this conflict doesn't end, that he pushes it almost to the level of Third World War, pushes it so that it threatens to cross the nuclear Armageddon and create such a situation for Donald Trump that even if he wants to, he cannot broker peace. At least no question of doing it, a day after he takes over. That is now becoming very painfully obvious.
thank you, General
So I
Bakshi.
think I'd like to end my initial comments here. Over to you, Dr. Adityanjee.
Thank you, General Bakshi, for your very lucid comments, and we will come back to you during the discussion phase. Now it's my honor and privilege to invite Dr. Satoru Nagao from Japan It is late at night actually in Japan, so I really admire his, commitment to this discussion. Dr. Nagao, you have 8 minutes to make your opening presentation. We are talking about Russia-NATO war, the endgame. Dr. Nagao.
Thank you very much. It is honor for me to speak just after the General G.D. Bakshi. It is really honor for me. And indeed, current topic the people want to hear is especially about what will happen under the Trump administration. Because Trump is seeking ceasefire in the Russia-Ukraine battle, but how to achieve it. Indeed, in my opinion, there is a high possibility that it will be looks like the Korean Peninsula. After the Korean War, both South Korea and North Korea fortified the borderline, and so now it looks like one of the most strongest fortress you can see in the line of the 38. If the fortification has succeeded between Russia and Ukraine, similar situation will happen in the Ukraine. So but why this is one of the answers that Trump will seek. I need to say it's logic to achieve reach this goal. Indeed, Trump cannot lose in the Russia-Ukraine war because Ukraine's failure is American's failure. So that's why America cannot lose this war. So under such kind of situation, what is a good answer? America need to find the answer. And in this case, Trump want to end this war and concentrate all the resources to counter China's strategy he want to seek. So that's why he needs a ceasefire, but he cannot lose the war. So if he succeeds to fortify the current front line, indeed, all of the condition he is facing will be satisfied. So that's why the fortification like the Korean Peninsula could be the answer he can seek under the current condition. But how to achieve it is the next matter. Indeed, America cannot spend more money to fortify this front line. This means that America must ask the American allies in Europe or the American allies in the other region like Japan to pay more to fortify the front line. So in case of the military area, of course, Europe must spend more, Trump will seek. And under such kind of situation, under the Trump administration, there's a high possibility that they will ask Europe to pay, to increase their defense budget from current 2% level of the GDP to 3% level of GDP or 4% of GDP, something like that. So in this case, this budget will include the fortification of the Ukraine, I believe. But at the same time, the current support to Ukraine is in some cases beneficial for the United States if this country buys American weapons. General J.D. Bakshi has already mentioned this is beneficial for the United States. That's why there's also the possibility that Trump administration will ask the European allies or other allies to support Ukraine to buy American weapons to send to Ukraine. That will happen, I believe. And in case of the infrastructure support, the military infrastructure is needed, but this infrastructure dual use, of course, America will ask Japan or other country, other allies to support it, I believe. So Japan needs to share some certain responsibility, I believe. But this idea has some problem. Can Russia agree is the most important problem? Because currently, Russia faces tough resistance from Ukraine, but in the long run, since 2040s, Russia has increased some certain level of the territories one by one. So that's why the view from Russia, even if they are facing the tough resistance just now, in the long run, this is successful operation. If Putin believes this is successful, that is a problem because Putin has the motivation to restart war in the future. So to occupy all of the Ukraine. So, and view from China, indeed, this is the ideal situation because if the war ends in Ukraine, this means that US can relocate all of the resources against China. To prevent such kind of situation, China wish the war continue forever. So that's why China has a motivation to support Russia. But the current situation is China hasn't provided weapon to Russia, even if they provided the material to produce weapon in Russia. So that's why, indeed, this is a problem built from the United States because China has a stock of ammunition to invade Taiwan, and America spends the stock of ammunition to support Ukraine and Israel. But this means that their stock, American stock, is not enough to support Taiwan. So that's why this is the ideal situation for China. So China has the motivation to support Russia to continue this war. So, what the problem Trump is facing, President Trump will face is such a situation. So Russia do not have the motivation to agree the ceasefire, and China will support Russia to continue this war, even if the fortification of Ukraine is a relatively good answer. So Trump need to change this is a matter of concern, and how that is a matter the Trump administration will face, I believe. But that is my current analysis. So how I need to find the answer also. Maybe Trump administration will find the answer. But that is my initial remark. And I should learn from the discussion in this place. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much indeed, Dr. Nagao, for bringing the China angle into this war and other issues that you have very rightly, brought to the discussion. Now I will invite our last distinguished panelist, Ambassador Shashank, who has joined us. So Ambassador Shashank, please give your opening statement. Kindly limit it to 8 minutes, please. Ambassador Shashank, please come and take the platform.
Yeah, thank you very much, Dr. Adityanjee. I think it's a very timely issue that we are discussing. Only thing is that the direction in which the conflict is going, it's difficult to predict what will be the situation because in the last 4 years, we have not seen any plan from the American side as to how to end the war. Apart from making Soviet Union, making Russia lose the war. That is the only solution they have, that keep on supplying weapons to Ukraine and other support that you can generate. And that will somehow or the other will be the war of attrition for Russia. And at some stage, their manpower would be reduced, their stocks would be reduced, and they would not be able to procure support from other countries, whereas NATO has become quite powerful after the end of the Cold War, and they have been carrying out even out of area operations. Only thing is that there are not very successful. Out of area operation which they tried in Afghanistan was not very successful. The one which they tried in West Asia, Iraq, Libya, and so many other places, there they found that it really provided partners for Russia, and for Europe, it provided a lot of refugees. So I think, therefore, while NATO has become powerful as regards the issue of weaponry, but the end results has not been that successful. We come after 4 years, we find that the American administration is still thinking of getting a better result in the Ukraine-Russia conflict by providing long-range missiles and also nuclear-capable missiles to Ukraine. We only hope that the Russian response will, of course, be taking into account Russia's own calculations, but we hope that it does not become damaging for world peace totally. And our Prime Minister Modi had been meeting the world leaders, trying to see how peace can be brought about through diplomatic negotiations, through a diplomatic solution. I think that seems to be a distant proposition at this stage. So we have to see what happens in the period up to the oath taking by President Trump towards the end of January. So this one, I think, is a rather period is a period, and only the Americans know, or the Russians know, or Ukrainians know to what extent they will go during this period. What we can see is that yes, in case the this war does not become a kind of a world war and very damaging consequences, then we hope that we can then find out as to what our Japanese friend has said, that what kind of ceasefire can be achieved. So first step would be ceasefire, and then we have to find out what will be the best arrangement to arrive at a durable peace. So far, there seems to be question of broken promises on all sides, and there seems to be a question of putting pressures on the other side. So that means that both sides feel that they can gain more territory or gain more losses on the opposition, then they might be able to negotiate a better peace deal. Now, negotiating a peace deal should come later. We have to first think of ceasefire and then find out what kind of diplomatic negotiations can be started, and which countries can be used either as intermediaries or if direct negotiations can take place, as we have seen that President Trump likes to negotiate directly with his adversaries. And so there's quite likely that if the President Trump is allowed a free hand and things are not settled by that time, that he will then come up with perhaps a solution which he had tried in the past by talking directly to the adversaries and the main leaders and telling them that we have to come to an agreement. And of course, he always has this feeling that he would be the fittest candidate for the Nobel Peace Prize. And I think Biden cannot definitely not think in terms of getting Nobel Peace Prize. So Trump has a possibility, and that will be very helpful to the Republicans in the domestic context, that they would be able to get the international approval for whatever they achieve. And if they can bring peace to the world, that would be very much appreciated. I think I will leave it at that because it's not 8 minutes, but I know that I wanted more time for discussions subsequently, because you have such learned people on the panel.
Thank you, Ambassador Shashank, for your very sober comments about possibility of, ceasefire and then possibility of a peace deal that may lead to a Nobel Peace Prize. Yes, that is always a sort of, a lollipop that is dangled before the politicians in international conflict. And sometimes it's successful, other times it is not. So we shall see. Now we go to the second phase, which is a moderated discussion. And usually I ask one question to each of the panelists. So my first question is going to be to Major General Shashi Bhushan Asthana. Major Asthana, a few months back, we had a roundtable discussion on the same topic, but we had discussed the possibility of use of TNVs, tactical nuclear weapons, because there was a lot of chatter about Russia is going to use tactical nuclear weapons, what are the situations, and in fact, Russia did revise its nuclear doctrine. And comments were made that NATO or Western countries are baiting Russian Federation to use tactical nuclear weapons. Didn't happen. What are your observations and comments of any possibility, even despite using hypersonic intermediate range ballistic missiles, whether Russia will ever resort to tactical nuclear weapons or it's just a talk only?
See, I think Russians have shown a fair amount of maturity in many ways. And apparently, the way that they brought out the issue of hypersonic and they tested the hypersonic, they feel that hypersonic with a conventional tip uh, and a conventional weapon should be able to meet their aims, which are their stated aims, which I covered in my talk. Now, the situation doesn't demand, although the provocation from Joe Biden's side is, but the provocation doesn't demand that he should act haphazardly and get the entire, shall I say, gains which he is likely to make after losing so many men and so much of equipment over 3 years. So apparently, they will continue to hold on to the tactical nuclear weapon. They have an option. Everybody knows that they have an option. But if need be, maybe there may be a more precision hypersonic attack in the next phase of escalation, if required. If things don't fall in the manner in which Russia wants them to be. So, in my opinion, uh, with, even if it is a tactical nuclear weapon, that is the next step in escalation ladder. I think Russia would like to avoid, because as of now, the things are such that Russia is coming out to be a gainer in this war, and Europe is coming out to be a loser. The use of tactical nuclear weapon may disturb this equation. So, in all probabilities, I feel that the chances are less. Before that, he may use a more powerful hypersonic before tactical nuclear. That's my opinion.
Thank you, Major General Asthana. Now, my next question goes to Major General G.D. Bakshi. Major Bakshi, you had talked about, the importance of boots on the ground, the manpower.
Yeah.
So I have a 2-point question for you. In your estimation, how many soldiers Russia has lost in this war over last 3 years? And second question is Russia so short of soldiers that it had to import North Korean soldiers into the war? What is the rationale there of bringing North Korea?
You see, from the very outset, Putin was somehow very curiously constrained in the use of manpower. He thought he would be able to do it like in Georgia, minimal show of force and he would overwhelm. That would have worked if he had gone into the rest of Ukraine in 2014. There were no Ukrainian defenses worth the name. He could have repeated Georgia. By 2022, it was too late. He started with 150,000 men against a Ukrainian army that was 250,000 strong to start with, and it had mobilized and gone up beyond 550,000, right? So, as it is, the Russians were fighting from a position of advantage. That didn't become apparent as long as they were attacking and they had the initiative. But after they had made the initial gains, by August of the first year itself, their severe manpower shortages were showing painfully. When the Ukrainians started their much heralded counteroffensives in Kherson, they had to pull out troops from Kharkiv. The American satellites, picked up those gaps, picked up the withdrawal of troops. There is total battlefield transparency now. And they told the Russians to go for the Ukrainians to go for it. And they used some light infantry and mechanized infantry, and they made a charge even as the Russians were withdrawing to the line of the Oskil River. So then there was a lot of anger in Russia, and they forced Putin, the generals forced Putin to mobilize 300,000 reservists, with the help of which they manned the Surovakin line, and they made a firm base, and they secured all the gains that they had made in this particular conflict. And from now on, they were in a position to press the advantage, right? It is the Ukrainians who have now been bled white because quite obviously there is a huge manpower disparity between Russia and Ukraine, right? Oh,
I think some technological thing happened with General Bakshi's camera. So hopefully he'll be able to join back. Meanwhile, I'll move on the discussion. I am going to ask the next question to Dr. Satoru Nagao. Dr. Nagao, you brought very interesting points, and I want to focus on Northeast Asia and this Russia-NATO war. You see, if you see historically, China has learned from the mistakes of either former Soviet Union or Russian Federation. Soviet Union implemented both glasnost and perestroika. When China liberalized, they did only perestroika, the restructuring, but no glasnost. Will Xi Jinping or CPC or Communist China learn war lessons from Russia, NATO, Russia-Ukraine conflict? What would be the implications on the timeline for China's plan to quote unquote reunification of Taiwan?
Thank you very much, sir. But there's a possibility that China, Xi Jinping's regime, quite afraid democratization in the Europe. So, for example, the colored revolution. So, of course, Putin regime afraid this situation in Europe. And if Ukraine has fallen, after that Belarus will fallen, and finally the Putin is fallen, that is one of the motivations Putin invade Ukraine in 2022, I believe. So that's why for, of course, Russia, this is the main topic. But indeed, for China, this is also the main topic. Always they worry about any democratic related movement. What happened in the Hong Kong is one of the good example, I think. Because Hong Kong's movement, yes, the demonstration movement was very active that some years ago. But even if that size of demonstration is big, this was not so violent revolution. But China tried to cracking down. Even if they break the promise with UK when they get back to Hong Kong. So that's why how afraid China is maybe indicate from the incident, I believe. So view from China, Taiwan could be the one of the symbol of democracy. It is true, I believe. If the Taiwan succeeded as a democratic country, this situation could affect other people in the continent to believe democracy could be successful in the continent too. Because the both are Chinese speaker. Indeed, view from history, Taiwan was not a part of China for a long time. So that's why we do not need to say Taiwan is a symbol of all of China. But still, view from Chinese people, if Taiwan will success as a democratic country, it could be the symbol of the revolution in China continent. So that's why the Xi Jinping worry about the existence of Taiwan or success of Taiwan. I believe that is a problem, I believe. Is this a proper answer for your question, sir?
Yeah, there was some talk about, 2027, Xi Jinping had planned to invade Taiwan. Now, this experience with war in Ukraine, will that delay that timeline or modify it or something like that?
It relies on the counter moves because I have already mentioned it prolonged Russia's aggression in Ukraine and America need to support Ukraine means that Americans do not have the enough resources or stock of ammunition to support Taiwan or support allies to prevent China to deter China's invasion to Taiwan. So that's why under the Trump administration, new Trump administration, they want to stop this flow and concentrate all resources against China. But at the same time, still there is a lesson already. J.D. Bakshi mentioned a level of the equipment. Western weapon is relatively strong in the conventional warfare. Of course, now the new drone age are coming and missile age are coming. In this case, Russia and China has many new missile and drones. But at the same time, still view from each conventional weapons, Americans or Western weapons, high technology, more higher than the Russia's one. So China used their domestic weapon based on the Russian weapon. That's why they do not have the confidence their weapon is better than the Western weapon. In this case, there is a possibility they overestimate the capability of the Western side weapon when they plan invasion to Taiwan. And that's why view from us, China has advantage in some area, but still China do not have the confidence that they can win in the Taiwan invasion. So in 2027, we should prepare, but at the same time, because of this, it is not easy decision for China to start real invasion to Taiwan, I believe. So Taiwan could be one kind of the West Germany or West Berlin during the US-Soviet Cold War. This is important. This situation will affect all of the strategy in this region, but it is not easy to invade. That could be the one kind of the Cold War. But that is my analysis.
Thank you, Dr. Nagao. My next question goes to Ambassador Shashank. Ambassador Shashank, in this day and age, any kind of war discussion is not just limited to military affairs, but its impact on actually the economic issues. In your opinion, do you think that one of the losers of this war is dollar as a global reserve currency?
I think it's an important question, Dr. Adityanjee. I think you have really touched very nub of the futuristic conflicts which will be on the currency issues. And President Trump has already announced that this will be a major area of his direct attack, because he has talked about de-dollarization and any attempt by BRICS countries to either adopt a currency or go for using some other methods which would reduce the important dollar would lead him to put 100% tariffs on the BRICS, on the concerned countries. So I think this will perhaps delay the process, because most of the BRICS countries, they have not yet united to such an extent. For example, you have Russia, which is under a lot of sanctions from the West, so they would have an interest in going about using. They have, not an interest, but they have to do something to use other currencies, because they cannot use the Western currencies any longer, and then the SWIFT is not open to them, so they have to think in terms of other system whereby they can have international currency exchanges. So they are in one situation. India is not in that kind of situation. China is very closely linked, even though there are efforts being made to de-link Chinese economy from the American economy, but I think experts are saying it will take at least 10 to 15 years before it can take place. And therefore, Chinese quite
कहीं विद्रोह किया गया, कहीं विद्रोहियों के लिए खुशी भी है, और इस खुशी के बीच जो तस्वीर सामने आ रही है
There
कोई
is
गुस्से
somebody
कोई
who
बताती है
has
कि
their open
गवर्नमेंट में
mic. Kindly mute yourselves, those who are not in the discussion. Kindly themselves. Please don't interfere in
Yeah.
Ambassador Shashank.
Yes, so I think India is quite conservative in this context. It has always been. I remember even in the early 70s when I was in the United Nations with the Indian delegation, we were always told that do whatever you want to do on the new international economic order, new international information order. But when it comes to actual, please do not do anything which is rash. It's very important because we are dealing with a very large number of poor people, and we sure that their welfare and development is the first priority for any government in India. And I think that priority would remain for India and also for the South. So therefore, in BRICS, I think there would be this thought of being sober, being realistic, and not to go for de-dollarization as such. But my worry is that that the dollar itself has been weaponized to such an extent that perhaps de-linked from gold standard, so which means that other countries have to come up with some solutions for their own uh, stability of their currencies, or to go for some kind of blockchain uh, uh, technology in some way. I'm not talking about bitcoins, but I think some way whereby any exchange records can be very meticulous and one can keep track of the flow of funds at the international level. So I think I will leave it at that. Perhaps maybe our Japanese colleague might have better idea about the financial figures.
Thank you, Ambassador Shashank. Dr. Nagao, do you want to make any comment, brief comment? Unmute yourself, please.
Yeah, I'm a security expert, not a financial expert, so that's why I'm not sure that my answer is proper in this case.
Thank you,
Thank you
Dr.
very much.
Nagao. Thanks for clarifying. We know that you are a security expert. I'm going to start going through the questions that have been raised in the chat room, and I will probably try to match the question with one of the distinguished panelists. So the first question is a two-part question, but I'll ask only the first part of the question, and that is from Rajendra Singh from World Bank. What will be the future action plan of Russia and Syria in view of advancement of rebels and Iran pulling out? And I will address that to General Bakshi. General Bakshi, can you answer that question, please? Somehow he is muted. General Asthana, do you want to respond to that particular question?
See, in my opinion, Russia's first priority will continue to be Ukraine. The Syria would have been a priority if it was a different situation. But today, with Ukraine war in a very critical stage, Russia will not like to dissipate resources to an extent that it troubles its operations in Ukraine. So what is likely to happen is that wherever Russian bases are vulnerable, maybe that they may redeploy their forces in a manner that they don't remain vulnerable. Maybe that some of the air support, in any case, they are giving it to Syrian army. That I think should continue. It will continue. As far as any major shift of additional resources from Ukraine is concerned, I have my doubts because the priority still remains the other side. As far as Syria is concerned, my only point is that any army, when their military stops fighting for themselves and gets scared, that country has a major issue. This happened with Afghanistan when Afghan army raised their hand, and otherwise a town like Aleppo could not have been fallen in 72 hours. It's too huge a town, and that too with few people. So obviously nobody fought. So when they don't fight, then it's a different issue. And it is something like Ukraine is today fighting with what Sean McFate calls it, fighting with a borrowed knife. Now, Syrians have been fighting with a borrowed knife for quite some time. Now, anyone who is fighting with a borrowed knife has a problem when they don't fight themselves. Unfortunately, Syrians have not fought it well. The first two towns, in fact, first three towns, I would put it this way. And that's why, even if, let's say hypothetically, Russia was to send some more resources, it wouldn't have helped, it will not help Syrians if they don't fight themselves. Now, this kind of evaluation, I'm sure Russian generals will also do. And therefore, they may not like to make the Ukraine situation as well as Syrian situation hopeless. Let the Syrian situation be hopeless as compared to, in comparison to Ukrainian situation. And they will give limited support in Syria and try and defend their resources by deploying them appropriately in a manner that they don't get hampered by the rebels.
Thank you, General Asthana. I'll go to the next question. The second part of the question from Rajendra Singh was that with the change in leadership in US and possibly some of the EU countries, what could be the biggest surprise in 2025? And there's a next question by Dr. Pradeep Desai. Is Ukraine war likely to be over in 2024 or will go on to become Third World War? I'm going to actually invite a member of the audience, Ambassador Pradeep Kapoor, to answer that. Ambassador Kapoor, please.
Well, I don't think it is likely to go on to become a Third World War, primarily because Donald Trump, as president designate and president elect, is going to take over the reins of power on 20th of January. And what was the first question? Sorry, Dr. Adityanjee.
The first question was that, what could be the biggest surprise in 2025 with change in leadership in United States as well as in some of the EU countries?
Well, I guess there will be a lot of surprises, and the biggest one will, of course, be if this war comes to an end as promised by the president-elect Donald Trump. The chances are quite mixed currently, but the impact that it has had on the US has been quite excessive, quite phenomenal, in the sense that just like the Democrats, when they lost the elections, they started indulging in a lot of finger pointing and blaming each other for the loss and talking about how they had propagated false narratives, and so many stories came out which had been kept under the carpet earlier. Similarly, if this Ukraine war ends in a way which is detrimental to the interests of US and detrimental to the interests of the Western world, which it seems likely to be the case, then again there will be a lot of internal rifts and sort of discussions, but also a lot of dissension amongst themselves because they will start blaming each other. They will start like Ukraine will blame the European countries will blame USA. In the other way, USA will blame Ukraine for not putting up people old age into the battle. So there will be a lot of recrimination between all of them. So it's going to be a very difficult situation for Ukraine, particularly because they've already lost a lot of territory to Russia. They've already, from whatever reports I've read, they've bargained off a lot of their balanced territory to organizations like BlackRock and Vanguard. And the infrastructure is in shambles. The buildings are absolutely it's totally destroyed, devastated. So for recovery will take a long time, will take a lot of money. The people's morale is totally broken. So the moment it's heading towards towards, as we have been discussing today, the end game, what comes of Zelensky will be an important thing to watch, because I don't think he has many days left in terms of being in power. So it's going to be very interesting to see how, because Biden in his last few weeks in power has tried to create a lot of disruption beyond what was already created in all these 2 years to the global markets, to the global economy, to the US economy, to the European economy, to the agricultural production. So the devastation which it has created globally during this period has been absolutely immense. immeasurable in many ways, and the repercussions will be felt for a long time. But let us see what happens.
Thank you,
Back to
Ambassador
you.
Kapoor. Just for our audience, Ambassador Kapoor is a very distinguished member of International Advisory Board of the Council for Strategic Affairs, and we are very honored to have him participate in most of our roundtable discussions and share his wisdom and knowledge. I'll go on to the next question, and it is from Shashwat Jha. Given the ongoing NATO-Russia tensions in Ukraine and Syria, how can Indian netizens strategically highlight US inconsistencies in its geopolitical actions to influence discourse around India's security and stability in Chittagong region? And I will address that to Ambassador Shashank. Sir, you're muted. Kindly unmute yourself.
Well, India is still trying to understand what is going on in Bangladesh. Reports which have been coming out are quite disturbing. And the interim government Bangladesh is generally saying that any instability or any attacks on the Hindus of Bangladesh are only motivated and being the Indian netizens. So I don't have to give any new ideas to the Indian netizens. They are already apparently doing things to damage the India-Bangladesh relations quite a bit. And sometimes they feel that they can make the geographical boundaries also vary from time to time, depending on their own flight of imagination. But I think that the same way as in Russia-Ukraine conflict, the internal dynamics which is developing in Bangladesh, I hope that situation will remain really calm, so that by the time the Americans set themselves a new agenda for South Asia and for the whole world, then we can come to a situation where Bangladesh perhaps would be more in tune with their international obligations and their commitments to their other neighboring countries. And I think this is very important because right now one does not know what is being done with the approval of the government, or are autonomous groups which are running riot among themselves by themselves without any control from anybody. So I think that's very important for the next weeks for us to see. Our foreign secretary is likely to be in Bangladesh in the next couple of days. So I hope he would be able to talk to the Bangladesh authorities, get an assess them as to what is going on and what is the future relationship which they want from India. I think that is what I can say at this stage.
Thank you, Ambassador Shashank. The next question is from Ryan, and the question is, do you believe that Russia win and take part of Ukraine, would it allow more states with irredentist view to feel more comfortable about retaking territories like China and Taiwan, Pakistan trying to gobble up Kashmir, or Iraq trying to get, Kurdistan? And I will actually address that to Dr. Nagao.
Yes, it is possible. Yeah, there's a possibility such kind of situation has happened. Because for a long time, people hasn't believed a military solution could happen, especially under the nuclear deterrence age, or American dominance as a superpower. That age, people do not believe the military solution is possible to expand territories. But if one country succeeds to expand territory by using the military power, military solution is one of the choices many countries will believe to do that. So that's why the one success story is a dangerous story to open the door. So that's why the logic of the Western country, including Japan, is Russia should lose in Ukraine, because this could be the symbolic example to expanding territory by using military power. But at the same time, currently, what we see is, yes, Ukraine's resistance is very strong. Russia lose certain huge number of huge part of the military power. That is true. But at the same time, one by one, they are expanding territory. So that's why well, this is not good. So that's so I think the Trump's effort to seek the ceasefire in this region in the current timing is not a bad idea, because if Russia continue to expand, that is not good. But at the same time, this ceasefire should not be the step to restart a new conflict in this region to expand territory by using military. That's why it's only the way to stop it is fortification, like the Korean Peninsula, I said. So this Korean Peninsula means that North Korea cannot expand territory by using a military anymore. And so that's why the military solution is not possible in this region. That's why this is could not be the symbol of the military solution to expand territory. I have already explained this idea faces some other difficulties related to Russia and China's decision. So that is my presentation. But anyway, that is the only solution I believe. In my opinion, that's true. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Nagao. I'll go to the next question, and it is from Dr. D.K. Pandey. In view of prevailing economic health of US, will Trump be able to ignore arms manufacturers' interest to produce more arms for Ukraine? And I will address that to Major General Shashi Bhushan Asthana.
As far as the pressure by arms manufacturers is concerned, that will certainly be there to President Trump as well. In my opinion, President Trump, the way he handles business, he's going to handle it the same way. I think he will make sure that a similar market appears in Taiwan, Japan, and South Korea. Because then you will find that the American media will start playing the Russian, let's say hypothetically, if the war tones down in Ukraine, then they will start playing the narrative of America, Russia flying over, doing exercises in South China Sea, etc., and try and hype up the threat the other side. And with that, you will find that and Chinese aggressiveness, because Cold War 2.0 will certainly be a little more, shall I say, activated under President Trump. And with this Cold War 2.0, obviously, all the countries which are there in Indo-Pacific, it will be played up that they are threatened, and therefore they need to buy a little more weapons. And considering that the same market will perhaps be utilized that side, India is also an option by virtue of some of the success of their equipment in Russia-Ukraine war. Maybe the India will also be interested in buying some. So I think he will find a market in the Indo-Pacific region as an alternative to what is happening the other side.
Very appropriate answer, Major General Asthana. You've given a very realistic scenario. We go to the next question. There's a question about North Korean troops being invited that has already been answered. Then there's a question from Dr. Shrikant Chopra. What is the realistic probability that India may or may not be allowed to play a role in being the peacemaker in this conflict? And I will address this question in my role as the moderator. My viewpoint is that essentially it is a white tribal European war, which erupts from time to time in that part of the world. India should not take upon herself to play any role and must not fall into seduction by the West that you have a role to play as a peacemaker. Well, there were some overtures made by India, by the Prime Minister, making calls to President Putin or to President Zelensky. But the nature of this conflict is inherently European power play. And India does not have skin in this game. And India should actually just watch from the distance, not get involved into any of the actual machinations of these forces that are playing over there, and let them duke it out. Because India does not have any enforcement role, does not have any power over these parties that have their own long-term goals that they are not talking about. So no, India should not fall as a prey or be seduced by the charm of being called a peacemaker or something like that. Let them duke it out. When they get tired, there will be end of it. There is a last question. Iran has been active for some time, but got itself silent during Trump's entry. Any role Iran would play in the Gulf region? Ambassador Shashank, this is the last question.
Well, Iran always remains an important player in the West Asian or Asian situation. And for America, it's one of the very important countries to be for consideration, because they were to the Americans for a long time. And then the Americans lost their so many helicopters while trying to evacuate their personnel from Tehran, that it has been always hurting the American sentiment that these are two areas, Vietnam and Iran, where they could not have a successful operation, of course, lately, and Afghanistan also. So Trump would definitely like to carry out an arrangement with Iran, whether it is of peace or for whatever. I think if he can find out the and deliver the hostages to Israel by intervention of Iran, I think, and he can do something what he was trying to do with Kim Jong-un in his first term. And that could be a possibility, because the American experts also feel that Iranian top leadership is rather old, and the young people do not have a similar kind of feeling as the older generation, and therefore they would to find out what are the possibilities of turning around Iran to a more peaceful role in West Asia and Asia as a whole. So we'll have to just wait and see as to how it goes. I think that will be a challenge for President Trump. And I think he wants to come out as a personal diplomacy at top level. So I think that will be his answer to carry out all these problems. The other thing I would just like to mention, that when the American hardware supplier try to find out new theaters to sell their equipment to the Americans or to the other countries, we have this new department which has been opened with Vivek Ramaswamy and Elon Musk, and they will not be very about giving a free run to the anybody who is making money out of the American government. They feel that they have been taken as a sucker for a long time, and they would now try to put them under controls.
Thank you, Ambassador Shashank. My heartfelt thanks to our distinguished panelists, Major General Shashi Bhushan Asthana, Major General Gagandeep Bakshi, Dr. Satoru Nagao, Ambassador Shashank, for giving their valuable time for this very important discussion. It was very enlightening and educative. My heartfelt thanks also to our audience members. This war has been going almost for now 2 years plus, and there is some, discussion fatigue because it became a quagmire, and now the goalposts have changed and all that sort of thing. So people have been ignoring this kind of topic, but I felt that there was a new angle about NATO's involvement, so we'll have this. So thanks to all our audience members. Lastly, my sincerest thanks to Team CSA, Mr. Ripudaman Pachori and Mr. Rajiv Verma, who work on the back end to make these kind of discussions possible. So my heartfelt thanks to them. For the audience from the United States, I will end with saying that in order to have more of such programs, please donate to CSA. We survive on donations from our audience members. So there is a link for PayPal donation. There's a link for True Karma donation, or you can mail a check to our PO box address. It is there on the website. We shall follow this up with our last program for year 2024 on December 14th, Saturday, by a distinguished lecture by Aviator Air Marshal Air Chopra, who will be talking about US-India defense cooperation. Thank you very much indeed to all of our distinguished panelists. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you very much, sir. And thank you very much, Ambassador Shashank.
Good to see you, Dr. Adityan.
Okay.
Oh, how many eggs do you need for your? I want two for that. Oh, do you see? Oh, thank you. अभी तो लेके आई क्या? ये अंदर से आओ पर. वो मेरे को एक कहानी समझ में आ रही है. वो ड्राई हो जाते हैं तो सड़ने लग जाते हैं.